In this video, I took out a loan of $500,000 to purchase my first plot of land, and now my mission is to build a successful farming empire. But there's one catch. I only have 2 years to do it. If you're interested, subscribe and let's get started. Just a little farther and we'll arrive at the plot that will soon become ours. As you've probably noticed, our bank balance is currently sitting at $0. You might be wondering, how are we going to afford this land? Well, the answer is simple. We're going to take out a loan. A big one, $500,000. And with the help of this field, we're going to work our way back and pay it off in full. The plot is just over 12 acres, which is quite a lot. Naturally, the price reflects that, $380,000. So, let's not waste time. We open the loan menu and take out the full $500,000. Once the money hits our account, we buy the field. Luckily for us, the land is already plowed, which means we can start seeding right away. But to do that, we need some equipment. So we set a course to the nearest store and drive there in our truck. When I arrived, I saw some used machinery parked out front. Apparently, these are discounted pieces of equipment available for purchase. Unfortunately, none of them fit our current needs. So, I ran into the store and began with the most important piece, our first tractor. We only had a bit over $117,000 left after buying the land, so I had to find a tractor that was both powerful and affordable. I chose a case tractor. It offered the best balance between power and cost. It set us back just over $69,000. But there was a problem. Our field is pretty far from the store, and driving the tractor there would take ages, not to mention I'd have to come back for the truck. Then I remembered, our pickup truck is fitted with a lowboy trailer hitch, perfect for hauling machinery from place to place. The trailer cost $28,000, but it was well worth it. Without it, moving equipment would be a time-consuming mess. Of course, we couldn't forget the seeder. While browsing, the shopkeeper offered me a mid-sized seeder at a generous discount, which immediately caught my interest. So I bought it, along with some seed pallets. With all the essential equipment purchased, it was time to transport it all to our new field. I hopped into our pickup, attached the lowboy trailer, then drove the tractor onto it and made sure it was securely strapped down. The seeder wouldn't fit on the trailer, so I'd have to come back for it later. Everything was ready, so I headed off to our land. After unloading the tractor, I returned to the store to get the seeder. Of course, I couldn't lift it by hand, so I asked the store employees for help. One kind man used a forklift to load it onto the trailer. I also asked if he could help unload it at the field. Naturally, I promised to pay him for the job. By the time I got back to our field, he was already waiting. Together, we quickly unloaded the seeder, and I drove the forklift back to the store. While I had the forklift, I also used it to load the seed pallets. After returning it, I paid the man $200 for his help. Now it was time to return home and start seeding our field. I attached the seeder to the tractor and filled it up with canola seeds. I chose canola because it's a highly profitable crop. Once the seeder was loaded, I got to work. I only managed to make a few passes across the field before it started to get dark, so I decided to continue the work the next day. But then I realized we had no place to sleep. To solve that problem temporarily, I placed a small tent on the edge of the field. It cost just $50. For now, it would serve as our overnight shelter. With that taken care of, I could finally head off to rest. Waking up the next day, I immediately noticed that the first interest payment on our loan had been withdrawn, just over $1,600. On top of that, I saw that the canola seeds planted yesterday had already started sprouting. That gave me a boost of motivation, and I quickly got back to work to plant the rest of the field as soon as possible. Since the field was quite large, the work took a good amount of time, but in the end, by midday, I had finally finished the job. and our entire plot was now fully planted with canola. While our canola was growing, I decided not to waste time and went out in search of a side job. I hopped in the pickup and headed to the store, where job contracts could be picked up. Upon arrival, I went straight to the offers tab. There were plenty of jobs available, so I had a decent variety to choose from. Eventually, I settled on a contract for plowing a field. Since we didn't have the right equipment yet, I had to rent the necessary machinery to complete the job. Because of that, the total payment would be reduced. We'd earn around $800 less. Still, in the end, we'd make nearly $30,000, which is a fantastic way to boost our budget. I finalized the rental and immediately went to check out the equipment. We were given 2 large John Deere tractors, each equipped with a plow. Since I couldn't operate both machines at once, I decided to hire a worker to help out. After that, we headed over to the field. By the way, it was located right next to our plot, which was super convenient. Once we arrived, we aligned the plows and got to work. Plowing isn't a quick task, so it took us a good chunk of time to complete. There was so much work to do that we didn't even manage to finish by sunset. Since a large portion of the field still needed plowing, I decided not to rush things and continue the job the next day. We parked the equipment near the field, and I headed home to rest and spend the night. The next morning, the first thing I did was check on our field, and I was happy to see that most of the canola had already sprouted. But there was still an unfinished contract waiting for me, so I quickly returned to the field we had been working on. However, when I got there, I was shocked to see that all the equipment was gone. That's when it hit me. The client had cancelled the contract and taken everything back. I rushed to the store to figure out what had happened. It turned out we hadn't finished the job on time, and the task was automatically voided. Even worse, we were charged $800 for the equipment rental. That really stung. Still, I had to keep earning money, so I started looking for another contract. This time, something I knew we could definitely finish within the deadline. I eventually chose a weeding job, which would pay us just under $26,000 upon completion. I signed the rental agreement and headed out to the assigned field. When I arrived, I noticed that the seeder had an empty grass seed tank, which confused me. Why would we need that for weeding? Just in case, I decided to fill it up. At the time, I had no idea that they had given us a regular seeder with a weeding function, and I wasn't entirely sure why this tool was chosen for the job. So I contacted that same helpful guy from the store and asked him to deliver our grass seeds that we had previously bought for our own field. Not long after, he was on his way. When he arrived, I thanked him for his help and paid him $50. Then I filled the tank with seeds and got started with the weeding task. I managed to complete the job successfully, and just as I finished, the rain began. I was really lucky that the downpour started after everything was done. I packed up the equipment and headed back to the farm to submit the job and collect the payment. When I arrived at the store, I finalized the contract and received the promised amount, which really lifted my spirits. We desperately needed the money, especially now with the upcoming purchase of harvesting equipment ahead of us. Once our canola is fully grown, we'll need something to harvest it with. So preparing for that moment is now my top priority. Without wasting any time, I accepted another contract, this time for mowing grass. The field was one of the largest on the entire map, but the payout matched the challenge. Just over $43,000. There was no way I could turn down an offer like that. After renting all the necessary equipment, I headed out to the job site. I set up the mower and got straight to work. I didn't finish the job until late at night. I had worked well into the evening because I didn't want to repeat my previous mistake of missing a deadline. So I made sure to complete everything on time. Once the entire field was mowed, I gathered the equipment and drove to the store to submit the contract and receive my payment. As a result, our balance increased, now sitting at just under $74,000. Since it was already dark, I hopped in the pickup and headed home, where I immediately went to rest. Because I had worked so late, I didn't wake up until close to noon. After checking on the state of our canola again, I decided to keep the momentum going and take on more contracts. With a solid amount of money already saved up, I accepted a small weeding job on a nearby field, not far from the store. I got into the tractor, made my way to the field, and completed the task fairly quickly, within just a couple of hours. For completing that contract, we received just over $25,000. That brought our balance to over $90,000, which I believe is more than enough to finally purchase a combine harvester and all the equipment needed for the upcoming harvest. So, I decided to head home and get some well-deserved rest, because a lot of important work lies ahead. As soon as I arrived, I didn't waste any time. I went straight to bed. Waking up the next day, I saw that our canola was almost fully matured and would soon be ready for harvest. That meant it was finally time to do what we'd been saving for all this time: buy the necessary harvesting equipment. Since we'd need the pickup and trailer to transport the equipment, the first thing I did was unload the seed bags we had purchased earlier. To keep them from sitting out in the open, I built a small shed and neatly stored them inside. With that done, I attached the flatbed trailer to the pickup and headed off to the store to start looking for our future combine harvester. Upon arrival, I checked the discount section first, hoping to find a deal, but unfortunately, there was nothing suitable there. That meant I had to look through full-priced options. And since combines aren't cheap, my choices were limited. In the end, I settled on a New Holland model priced at $55,000. Of course, I also needed a header. The official header from the same brand was priced at $20,000, which was way too much. So I found a compatible alternative from another company for only $7,000. That saved us a total of $13,000, which is a pretty big win. Now it was time to prepare. I hopped into the combine, attached the header, then carefully drove it onto the trailer and secured it tightly. Everything was ready, so I hit the road toward our field. Due to the large size of the combine, sharing the road with other vehicles was difficult, so I decided to take the dirt road instead. It took a bit longer, but at least we weren't getting in anyone's way. Once I arrived back at the farm, I began unloading. To be honest, unloading the combine was much easier than getting it up there in the first place. And just like that, we now had our own combine harvester, fully ready for the upcoming canola harvest. With that, I decided to call it a day and get some rest, while our crop continued to ripen. Once the canola was fully ripe, I suddenly remembered I had completely forgotten about a trailer to hold the harvested crop. Then it hit me. I had seen a discounted trailer parked at the store earlier. It looked like it would be a perfect match for our pickup truck. Without wasting any time, I headed straight to the shop. The trailer cost $11,500. I paid the price, hooked it up to the pickup, and made my way back to the farm. Once there, I jumped into the combine and started the harvest. As soon as the combine's grain tank filled up for the first time, I unloaded the canola into our brand new trailer. After filling the trailer to the top, I jumped into the pickup and started looking for the best place to sell the canola. Luckily, I found a great deal not too far from us. Without wasting any time, I headed straight there. While driving, I noticed the pickup was sagging slightly under the weight of the loaded trailer. I made a mental note to look into upgrading it once I got home. Upon arriving at the sell point, I began unloading the canola. For a full trailer, I earned just over $73,000. Honestly, that exceeded all my expectations. It was a fantastic amount for us at this stage. When I got back to the farm, I decided to build a small workshop to upgrade the pickup. The first thing I planned to do was replace the wheels with stronger ones, better suited for hauling heavy loads. That upgrade cost me $6,500, but now the vehicle should handle the trailer weight much more efficiently. After that, I continued harvesting. Once again, I worked late into the night to stay on schedule. I managed to gather another nearly full trailer of canola, but I decided to wait until the next day to sell it. That's it for today. Equipment stored and time to rest. The next day, I went out and sold the canola I had harvested the night before. After the transaction, our balance jumped to just over $135,000. Once I returned home, I decided it was time to invest that money into developing our farm. We had accumulated quite a bit of equipment already, and most of it was still sitting out in the open. It was the perfect time to fix that and finally build some proper shelters. I started by removing the tent and dismantling the old temporary shed. Then I planted grass over a small patch of land to prepare a level surface. That's where I built a covered shelter for our farm machinery, and right next to it, a small house for living. I also moved the workshop closer to the equipment area. To round it out, I set up a small garden where I plan to grow vegetables in the future. I even built a separate garage for the pickup, and for crop storage, I added a silo. I fenced the entire area. And in the end, we had a really nice starter farm, which we'll definitely continue expanding in the future. The last thing to do was park all the equipment in its proper place. And of course, I didn't forget to make a small payment on our loan, sending $20,000 toward it. It wasn't much, but little by little, we'll pay it off completely. And with that, I decided to wrap up for the day. Waking up early in the morning, I started thinking about what would be the best thing to do today. Since we recently harvested our field, it would make sense to sow it again. Last time, we realized that selling the crop brings in a decent profit, and I don't want to miss out on that opportunity. But before sowing, the field needs to be plowed, and for that, we'll need the appropriate equipment. So I got into the tractor and headed to the store. It seems that last time I was there was a pretty good cultivator on sale. I really hope no one has bought it yet. Otherwise, it would be a pity because the machine is truly excellent. While driving, I started thinking about the possibility of growing vegetables. We recently prepared several garden beds near the house, and now I'm curious about how much profit they could bring. Money is needed more than ever right now. The loan still needs to be paid off. When I arrived, I saw that there were two cultivators on display in the parking lot. One of them, the one on the left, immediately caught my attention. I walked up to check the price. It turned out to cost $10,000. Since I had enough funds, I completed the purchase right away. Then I got back into the tractor and attached the new cultivator. It fit perfectly, so well that I didn't even need a counterweight. It was time to head back to the farm. Upon arriving at the field, I drove onto it, carefully unfolded the cultivator, and began working. First, using the discs, I loosened the soil, grinding up the top layer. Then the roller leveled and crushed the large clumps of earth. The result was perfectly prepared ground for the upcoming sowing. Since our newly purchased cultivator turned out to be quite wide, the work took much less time than I expected. By midday, I had almost finished the job, and our field was nearly fully prepared for the upcoming sowing. As soon as I was done, I folded up the cultivator and returned to the farm to switch it out for the seeder. But before I could make the switch, I first had to clear some space under the shed where the seeder was stored. It took a bit of effort to carefully rearrange everything, but in the end, the cultivator was safely under the roof, and I could calmly head out to the field with the seeder. At some point, I remembered that last time we sowed canola without applying the proper amount of fertilizer. That made me think, this time we should do it right and enrich the soil with nutrients. So I decided to drive to the store and purchase some fertilizer. I moved the tractor away from the entrance and switched to our pickup truck. It would be much faster than driving the tractor with the seeder attached. Once I got to the store, I started picking out the right fertilizer. In the end, I chose a pallet with bags for $1,400. I think that amount will be more than enough to fertilize the entire field. The only thing left was to load the bags into the pickup, and since carrying them by hand would have been way too heavy, I decided to ask the store employees for help. They didn't refuse to help me, and after a while, the pallet with fertilizer was already loaded onto the bed of our pickup truck. Of course, I paid them for the service. After that, I hurried back to the field, as there was less and less time left before nightfall. Upon returning to the farm, I drove the trailer up to our seeder to immediately transfer the fertilizer directly into its tank. Since the fertilizer compartment in the seeder isn't very large, the filling process went quickly. Now it was time to head to the field and start sowing. Just like last time, I chose canola. It's a profitable crop, which means we could earn a decent amount and put that money toward paying off the loan. The work progressed gradually. Whenever the seeder ran out of fertilizer, I would bring more with the pickup and continue sowing. Toward evening, it started getting dark, and I was almost done working the field. All that remained was to park the equipment in its place, and the work for the day was done. In the end, we fully sowed and fertilized our large field. Now, all that's left is to wait for the canola to sprout and ripen. And tomorrow, I plan to take care of our garden beds near the house, because I really want to see how much profit they can bring. But that will come later. For now, it's the perfect time to rest. Waking up the next day, I once again noticed that interest had been deducted from our balance for the loan. Since we now need funds to develop our vegetable growing project, I decided to take the pickup truck and head to the store to pick up a small contract and earn a bit of money. I plan to invest the money I earn into an automatic water refill system for irrigation, as well as everything else needed for vegetable farming. Upon arriving at the store, I started looking for a contract that would allow me to quickly earn the required amount. One of them offered a payment of just over $9,000 for cultivating a field located not far from the store. I thought it was the perfect option for us. I got into a freshly rented tractor, attached the necessary equipment, and headed to the field. As I mentioned, the plot was almost right across the road from the store. When I arrived, I unfolded the cultivator and got to work. The tractor provided to us turned out to be powerful enough, so moving such a large cultivator wasn't a problem. Thanks to that, I managed to work fairly quickly, but I didn't finish before the rain began. I had to speed up so the soil wouldn't get too wet and the equipment wouldn't get stuck. We managed to finish just in time, and I went to collect the payment. As a result, our balance increased by almost $13,000, a sum that I believe is enough to continue developing the garden. On the way home, I noticed the rain had intensified quite a bit, so once I got back, I decided to take a break and save the gardening for after the weather cleared. When the rain stopped, I headed straight to the garden beds to assess what we'd need for growing vegetables. In the end, I realized that for successful gardening, we only need 3 things: seeds, fertilizer, and of course, water. The first thing I decided to do was install a water auto refill tank for $5,000. Now, we definitely wouldn't have any problems with water. The next step was buying seeds and fertilizer, which meant it was time to head to the store. I hitched a low-bed trailer to the pickup to transport everything I needed and set off. Upon arrival, I parked and started picking out supplies. First, I bought 1 box of seeds and 1 box of fertilizer. I didn't buy too much because I want to first see what kind of profit we can get from these garden beds. I also purchased a manual lifter to make it easier to load and transport the boxes. It cost only $220. Everything I needed was gathered, and the only thing left was to carefully load it onto the trailer. First, I used the lifter to load both boxes, then the lifter itself, secured everything with straps, and headed back to the farm. Once I arrived, I parked near the garden beds and started unloading. It wasn't easy work, even with the lifter, but eventually I managed to carry everything to the planting area. All the required resources were in place. All that remained was to decide which vegetables to grow and get started. As soon as everything was up and running, I realized we should build a proper entrance for easier transport of pallets in the future. I worked on that for a bit, and now everything was ready. At that moment, all the work on the farm was complete, and the only thing left was to wait for the canola to grow and the vegetables to ripen, so I went to take a rest. While I was doing that, pallets of vegetables slowly began to appear. The economy started to come alive, and the profit began to grow. I woke up in January. By then, the canola had fully matured, and the storage area was packed with vegetable pallets ready for sale. During the time we were resting, the loan interest kept being deducted, and our balance went into the negative. Just over $9,000. I decided it was time to get back to work and start earning again. The first thing I did was hitch the trailer to the pickup to start loading it with vegetable boxes. I carefully pulled up to the entrance I had recently built, grabbed the loader, and began loading the boxes one by one. It wasn't an easy job, but little by little, the trailer filled up. Once it was fully loaded, I headed to the selling point. This time, I was only able to sell carrots, and I earned almost $3,500 for them. However, we still had 2 pallets of garlic, which weren't accepted at that location. I had to find another place to sell them. The garlic earned me much more, almost $23,000. That was an excellent amount, especially considering how many pallets were still left on the farm. I returned home and set up an automatic vegetable selling system. I realized this was a truly profitable business. As for the boxes that were already ready, they still had to be loaded by hand and delivered for sale. Just as I was finishing the loading, I saw a payment come in, just over $42,000. I immediately understood. It was money from the vegetable sales that had accumulated while we were resting. That news really made me happy. Such funds will definitely come in handy for developing the farm and paying off the debt. After loading the remaining boxes, I headed to the selling point and earned another $9,000. Now that the entire garden harvest was sold and new vegetables were still growing, it was time to start harvesting our canola. I attached the proper trailer and got back to work. I ran over to the harvester, getting ready to start the harvest. But first, I had to clear the exit a little. The tractor was parked right in the way. I quickly moved it aside, and now nothing was stopping me from getting to work. Everything was ready. It was time to head to the field and begin harvesting our canola. By evening, I had managed to completely fill one trailer and harvest about half of the canola from our field. Since it was already dark, I decided not to rush to sell it, so I parked the trailer with the crop under the shed and returned the equipment to its place. The day's work was done. Time to rest. The next morning, after waking up, I got into the pickup and drove to the canola selling point. The road went through some pretty steep hills, but our pickup handled them without any problems. Soon I arrived at the destination and began unloading the crop. As a result, I earned just over $73,000 from the canola sale. On top of that, I noticed that money was regularly being deposited into the account from the automatic vegetable sales. Thanks to that, our balance had increased to $148,000. Before heading home, I stopped at the gas station. There was very little fuel left in the tank. After refueling with diesel, I returned to the farm and resumed the harvest. While I was working in the field, snow unexpectedly began to fall, but I was almost done anyway, so I didn't pay it much attention. By lunchtime, everything was finished, the harvest was complete. I filled another trailer to the brim, and the remaining canola was unloaded directly from the harvester into our silo. After that, I parked the harvester under the shed and headed back to the selling point. From this next load of the harvest, I earned almost $72,000. After returning to the farm, I parked the trailer in its place. That meant another stage of work was complete. I decided to check how things were going in our garden beds. I saw that our seed and fertilizer supplies were almost gone, which meant it was time to head to the store again. After hitching the trailer to the pickup, I set off for some shopping. This time, I bought 6 boxes of seeds and 6 boxes of fertilizer. Knowing I wouldn't be able to handle the loading on my own, I asked for help from the guy I already knew at the store. He gladly agreed and quickly loaded all the boxes onto the trailer. When I got back home, I didn't unload everything right away. Instead, I parked the trailer under the shed and went to rest. The next morning, I moved the pickup closer to the garden beds, pulled out our manual lifter, and started unloading. But no matter how hard I tried, the process was really slow. The boxes were placed too high, higher than our lifter could reach. On top of that, the uneven ground caused it to either tip over or lose traction. That's when I made the decision. It was time to buy a small wheel loader that could handle tasks like this with ease. I carefully pushed all the boxes down from the platform onto the ground, then loaded the lifter back onto the trailer. Now it was time to head out and get the new equipment. I went to the store and bought the most affordable wheel loader available. It cost $48,000. After loading it onto the trailer, I headed home. Upon arrival, I carefully drove it off the platform and immediately started transporting the boxes to our garden beds. I poured 2 boxes of seeds and 2 boxes of fertilizer into the garden near the house and decided to keep the rest in reserve. After all, my plan was to use the earned money for expansion. I decided to build another, larger garden bed for $50,000. It should generate significantly more profit. It turned out to be quite spacious, and I had to move our farm's fence a little. After that, I built some paths and enclosed the area with a new fence. Now it was time to fill the bed. I added seeds and fertilizer. That way, we had one more large garden, which would now also produce vegetables. Since I had set up automatic crop sales, all the earnings would immediately be deposited into our account. Once all the work was done, I parked the pickup and went to rest. The next day, to my surprise, I saw that our balance had already reached $330,000. That meant that in just one night, we had earned over $200,000 from vegetable sales. So I decided to rest one more day to accumulate enough funds to fully repay the loan. And sure enough, by the next day, our account had reached nearly $600,000. I immediately sent most of that amount toward paying off the debt. Now the loan was fully paid off. No more interest will be deducted from us, and all the money we earn will go directly into developing our farm. We now have a homestead that brings in stable and high income through vegetable sales. We have our own field where we can grow any crops we want, and we've gathered a good amount of agricultural equipment, which makes the work truly enjoyable. So, I think this is a good place to wrap things up for now. If you enjoy this video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.